The Mexican Council on Foreign Relations presents Coyuntura Comexi. In today's episode, Pakistan and its concurrent crises, a conversation with Dr. Mariam Mufti, University of Waterloo. How did the political instability start in Pakistan? How and why did the non-confidence vote against Imran Khan happen?
In spring of 2022, the opposition political parties had come together. They had formed a coalition called the Pakistan Democratic Movement, the PDM. And this was a coalition of political parties that should not necessarily have come together as a coalition because they were opposed to each other ideologically and otherwise. However, they came together because they were directly opposed to Imran Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the PTI. That was the ruling party at the time. And they somehow wanted to oust him from power. Now, there are three reasons for why the no confidence motion happened. And before I get into the three reasons, I have to reiterate that a no confidence motion in a parliamentary system of government is the legal way of getting rid of a government that people don't necessarily have any confidence or faith in anymore. In any case, Imran Khan faces this no confidence motion primarily because of his own follies, and for three reasons precisely. Okay, the first reason is that his government was rife with problems and malgovernance. The economy was not doing well under Imran Khan's government. His dealings with the IMF in order to sustain Pakistan's economy had not gone well. His finance ministers had been unable to sustain economy. And by the time that Imran Khan was ousted from power, inflation was already hitting like 27%. I will also add that at the time of the no confidence motion, the economy was so bad that Pakistan had to go back to the IMF to bail it out because its debt payments were coming due and Pakistan would not have been able to make those payments. So Imran Khan's government essentially was not a good one. And it was not performing well. And so the fact that the opposition political parties were calling for a no confidence motion as a result of that was completely justified. The second reason, which is far more nefarious, is that if you look at how Imran Khan was elected, he was certainly elected in 2018 with the support of the Pakistani military, which had decided that it would boost and prop up Imran Khan's political party from behind the scenes in order to make sure that the Pakistan People's Party or the Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz, which had previously been in power and was composed of tried and tested politicians, would not return to power. So they propped up Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and they propped up Imran Khan. And but when Imran Khan becomes prime minister, he starts to assert his independence from the military and he starts to interfere in foreign policy in ways that does not appeal to the military. Okay, so Imran Khan does a couple of things. The first is he interferes in appointments of military leaders. So the fact that he tried to appoint his own person to be the director of the inter-services intelligence in Pakistan was a major problem for the military. The second was that Imran Khan, instead of maintaining Pakistan's alliance with the United States, had actually started to move away from the United States and criticize the United States quite a bit and cozy up with China and Russia. That was also not favorable for the military. So because of these sorts of things and the fact that the military in Pakistan does continue to maintain tutelary dominance over civil military relations in Pakistan, Imran Khan lost favor of his major ally in politics, that is the military. And so when that happens, the opposition parties basically smell a rat and they're like, okay, fine, you know what, no confidence motion it is, because this man is now losing his alliance with the military. Now, the third reason, which is entirely Imran Khan's own fault, is that in order to form the government back in 2018, he had relied on a bunch of politicians who were not necessarily loyal to his political party. These were politicians who were known for switching party loyalty and breaking away from their chosen political party when it suited them These politicians are known as electables. They're political heavyweights. They're influential politics that don't necessarily need a party platform in order to win elections. And so when the no confidence motion comes about, these disaffected politicians move away from Imran Khan. And in this crisis of legitimacy that Imran Khan faces, they decide to switch sides and side with the opposition against Imran Khan. So when the no confidence motion finally happens, Imran Khan's defeated. His own coalition crumbles, right? Because he was relying on politicians who were not necessarily loyal to him.
How has the situation shifted to the popular movement Imran Khan has cultivated to procure his return to power?
So the reality of it is, and I think Pakistan's misfortune. Imran Khan, as a political leader, has always been more successful outside of the parliament than he has been successful within the parliament. Okay, so the no confidence motion is basically a democratic way to oust a parliamentary leader, which is what happens, but that does not necessarily take away Imran Khan's power to act on the streets. And so when he is ousted from parliament, Imran Khan immediately goes back to his original modus operandi, which is to continue his political campaigning on the streets of Pakistan and continue to agitate and continue to cry foul against the no confidence motion and against the opposition political parties. Okay, so he does a couple of things really, really well. The first is that he continues the rhetoric that the leaders of the opposition political parties, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz and the Pakistan People's Party, these are leaders who are extremely corrupt. They belong to political dynasties. These are not honest political parties with integrity. Okay, and he continues this rhetoric again and again and again and again. And frankly speaking, the leaders of these political parties have actually not done themselves any favors because they are in fact extremely corrupt, and they have been indicted in Pakistan's court. And in fact, the leaders of these political parties have been removed and disqualified from politics for being corrupt, right? So Imran Khan basically keeps reiterating this rhetoric again and again. Now, in comparison to these leaders, Imran Khan himself comes off as somewhat of a clean politician, even though I will say that he might be cleaner than the rest. He is not entirely clean, right? So he does this very well. The second thing he does is that he maligns the military consistently, right? And given that Pakistan's politics has really been a never-ending tussle between the military and the political elites in Pakistan, and the fact that I think the country's citizens are also sick and tired of the military constantly dominating politics from behind the scenes, Imran Khan used this rhetoric very well to his advantage, right? Then the third thing that happens is that he embroils the state. And this is I think I would say, Pakistan's greatest misfortune, that opposition political parties, or rather political parties that are not in government, such as Imran Khan's, tend to create such a situation of agitation and confrontation on the streets of Pakistan outside of the parliament that in fact there is no democratic way to resolve the tensions within the country, right? By deliberation, by conversation, by parliamentary action, by legislation, by any of these other more peaceful ways of resolving tensions. And in fact, it becomes a situation where it's all about protest and agitation and confrontation, right? And Imran Khan is extremely good at this. He's good at it because he did it in 2014 in order to embroil the then government of Nawaz Sharif, okay, Pakistan Muslim League N, all right? And he's done it again after his ouster in 2022. And for the entire year, he has basically embroiled the coalition government and prevented the coalition government from acting on any of the things that it needed to act on, right? Acting on a response to the floods, or responding to the climate emergency, or responding to the economic situation in the country. And he has done it in a way by, I think, touting conspiracy theory. One of the conspiracy theories was that the United States was involved in the no confidence motion that happened against him. The second conspiracy theory was regarding the chief of army staff who was leaving office, and how his coalition partners would keep saying that this was the chief of army staff who had helped Imran Khan come to power, but now Imran Khan has turned his back on him. So it was basically a lot of rhetoric and a lot of political conversation, which was just, I think, something that Imran Khan is good at. And then on top of everything else, when there are certain by-elections in the province of Punjab, Imran Khan wins those seats. Now, Punjab is the heartland of the current coalition government led by Shehbaz Sharif. And Imran Khan wins those by-elections, which means that he's still popular amongst the people and his rhetoric is working.
How do the two upcoming provincial elections that represent half of the country affect the current government's ability to govern and stay in power?
So what happens in the provinces essentially is as follows. So first of all, you need to understand that Pakistan's a federal country, right? Just like Mexico is. And by virtue of being a federal country, there are 4 provinces in Pakistan. Punjab is the largest province and is home to about 54% of the population. The other province is about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I think, is about, if I'm not mistaken, close to maybe 15-20% of the population. So we are talking about more than half of the country, right? Now, as luck would have it, when Imran Khan is ousted from political power, he's ousted from the National Assembly. The provincial assemblies don't fall. So the provincial assembly leaderships are still in control of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is Imran Khan's political party, right? So basically the coalition government led by Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, comes to power in a situation where the province of Punjab is being run by a PTI-led government, and the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is being led by a PTI government as well. Okay, now given that this is a federal system, all right, the prime minister is quite, how should I say, in a country where politics tends to be centralized, even though it is a federal political system, the prime minister is actually, in this particular instance, not empowered enough, and this is thanks to the 18th Amendment, which was passed in 2010, not empowered enough to do very much within the provinces themselves, right? So that's problem number one. Now, because Imran Khan, as the leader of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, convinces his chief ministers in these 2 provinces to dissolve the assemblies, the Punjab assembly is dissolved and the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa assembly is dissolved, constitutionally speaking, the national government, which is led by Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, is constitutionally required to call for an election within 90 days, which means that elections must happen within 3 months, right? Even though the national government elections will not happen until August. Okay, now if elections are called within 90 days and they happen in the next few months, all right, what if PTI is successful and wins those elections? It means that probably the path to the national election in August is quite set for the PTI's victory, right? And that Imran Khan's going to return to power. So the provincial elections will basically become a test of whether or not the coalition government can succeed. Now, the problem is that if elections are held in 90 days, the likelihood of Imran Khan winning are actually pretty high because the coalition government is not doing really well. And the coalition government is not doing well because inflation in Pakistan is hitting close to 28%. And the price of food is doubling. The price of gas is soaring. People cannot afford their, people really cannot afford to sustain their daily lives. And the IMF is delaying the 9th review of Pakistan's economy, which means that Pakistan does not have any money to pay back its debt. Pakistan really does not have any money to run the country. So the coalition government is unable to, at this point, win any points with the people, let alone carry out a political campaign in order to win the provincial elections. So the chances of Imran Khan winning are pretty high. And that's essentially the problem.
From what you have explained, it sounds like the return of Imran Khan to power is almost inevitable. When and if that takes place, what will happen with this tension between the civilian and military powers?
So the civil-military tensions in Pakistan right now, I think, unfortunately, there is no solution to them. The good news, though, is that there's a new chief of army staff. Okay. The last chief of army staff left behind a very complicated legacy. General Rahil Bajwa had a very particular view of the role that the military should play in civilian politics. He was the man responsible for bringing Imran Khan to power. He was also someone who sort of crafted a deal with Imran Khan to have his term as chief of army staff renewed. This was an army chief who had ambitions beyond just being an army chief. And he was more involved in civilian politics than should have been necessary. And I think, unfortunately, because of all of those reasons, he left behind a legacy where the military's reputation has actually taken a bit of a beating, right? And whenever the military's reputation is hurt, the military actually recedes back further into the barracks, so to speak, and reevaluates its position, right, in politics. And I think that the new chief has to do that, right? The new chief of army staff in Pakistan right now is recalibrating what the role of the Pakistani military needs to be. And I think that at this point in time, they will not interfere in elections, because I think they see, and I think they can read the tea leaves just as well as anybody else. They have all the intelligence in the country. And I think they know that if the provincial elections are held and that Imran Khan's party wins, they need to figure out a way to form a working relationship with Imran Khan. Now, mind you, Imran Khan too knows that he will need the military eventually if he were to come back to power. And so in December, he actually started walking back a lot of his criticism of the military as well. And some of his coalition partners had actually started giving interviews in the media that had started praising the military all over again as well. So 2022 ended with Imran Khan sort of walking back some of his criticism, because he knows that he will have to form a working relationship with the new army chief. His criticism of the military over 2022 was against General Bajwa, right? The outgoing chief of army staff. But with the new one, I think Imran Khan's going to try and set up a working relationship moving forward, because, I mean, we all know that Pakistan's foreign policy for the most part is set by the military, especially when it comes to India, Afghanistan, Kashmir. And as a prime minister, you need to work with the military on these fronts. And with an economy that is suffering as badly as Pakistan's is, a prime minister that does not have a working relationship with the military is quite, how should I say, has his hands tied behind his back. So I think Imran Khan knows that, the military knows that, and I think nothing's changed, just that I think the relationship is being recalibrated right now.
In this context, is it possible to foresee a new Khan government being the solution for this perfect storm?
The solution to Pakistan's economic problems are very simply this. Pakistan needs to increase its tax revenue. And it needs to increase its tax revenue by making sure that everyone pays their taxes. And if Pakistan cannot fix its tax regime, okay, this is a country that cannot be a democratic government. I mean, in political science, when we think about democracy, we tend to say no taxation, no representation. right? And given that Pakistan is a country that does not earn or collect any tax revenue from its 200 million strong population, is one of the reasons why this government is not accountable to the people, and which is one of the reasons why this government does not end up functioning like a democracy. So if you want to fix this economy, okay, the IMF is very is very clear. The IMF says you need to stop giving subsidies, okay, subsidies that you cannot afford to give to the people, to reduce gas prices and to reduce food prices and to reduce the cost of living. You cannot give these subsidies because you cannot afford them. Okay, so stop the subsidies. Second, the IMF says start collecting tax revenue. Your government cannot function if you're not going to earn any money, right? I mean, this is a straightforward principle of economics. So, so if the political elite in Pakistan is not willing to do what is required to keep this government accountable to the people, then unfortunately, we don't necessarily have a solution to either economics or politics. It's as straightforward as that. And I don't think that a new Khan government is going to change anything, because even though Imran Khan says that the problem of Pakistan's corruption, yes, the problem of Pakistan's corruption, I agree. Corrupt politicians are awful for the country. I agree with that too. But what's worse for the country is that the government is unable to tax its people. Right? And the fact that the Khan government is not necessarily willing to change that because it suits the politicians who are now part of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf to not pay taxes themselves and to not tax the people, and then unfortunately there's a lack of political willingness to make any changes. And I don't see that another Khan government changes that. I think Pakistan has gotten so used to receiving international aid from countries like the United States, who, frankly speaking, given Pakistan aid money whenever it needed Pakistan to do some kind of national security work for the Americas, that I think Pakistan has now gotten used to other countries bailing it out. It's used to the IMF bailing its economy out. It's used to international trade from the World Bank. It is used to aid from the United Nations. It is used to aid from the United States. You see, the first time Pakistan received a whole bunch of aid from the United States, it was under General Ayub back in the 1960s. And the second time Pakistan receives international aid, it's under General Ziaul Haq during the Afghan War from 1979 to 1989, height of the Cold War. Okay, the third time Pakistan receives a heck of a lot of international aid is under General Musharraf. Do you see a trend here? America bails out every single military regime in Pakistan because they need the military in Pakistan for their national security interests. And that's fine. I understand. Aid money is always given in exchange for some kind of vested self-interest. I get that. That's politics. That's realism. But at the same time, what's happened, unfortunately, is that America has allowed for the military in Pakistan to be the strong institution that it is. It has allowed for Pakistan's economy to be dependent on US dollars and aid money. And now, unfortunately, Pakistani politicians do not know how to fix the country's economy because they're dependent on getting an easy way out of all of their economic problems. And it's as simple as that. Now, the third problem with the economy is that it's this entire situation that Pakistan's experiencing right now is because of a debt crisis. And a debt crisis that has resulted in the depreciation of currency. And when the currency depreciates, unfortunately, your debt becomes even more expensive. And when your debt becomes even more expensive, you're unable to pay it back. And when you're unable to pay it back, your currency depreciates even more, and your economy just starts to spiral, right? And that's pretty much what's happening in Pakistan right now, right? So in order to prevent capital flight, the State Bank of Pakistan imposes ridiculous rules and regulations on imports and exports that hurts the economy even more. And it tries to peg the Pakistani rupee to the US dollar, which hurts the Pakistani economy because right now we don't necessarily have any foreign exchange reserves to back it up. And Pakistan is was very close to a default in December, right? I mean, there was only $3 billion left in the foreign exchange reserves. So the economy was on the brink, and if Pakistan had defaulted, it would not have been very good, given that Pakistan is home to 220 million people. And in a part of the world where, frankly speaking, an economic crisis like this would be a disaster. And so right now, how do you fix the problems? I'm not saying it's an overnight solution, but I'm saying that there is a solution. And the solution has to come from Pakistani political leaders. And unfortunately, I don't see them changing their way of doing politics.
How does the wave of violence attributed to the Taliban in Pakistan further impact the political and economic scenario in Pakistan and the ability of any Pakistani government to deal with it?
The last wave of violence that Pakistan has suffered is obviously the attack in the mosque in Peshawar, which resulted in about 80 deaths, if I'm not mistaken, and a lot of injuries. Now, this attack was attributed to the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP. Now, a couple of things that need to be mentioned here is that the TTP is not the same thing as the Taliban in Afghanistan. So back in 2021, when President Biden removes US troops from Afghanistan and the country falls into the hands of the Taliban, those Taliban are Pashtun, they're Afghan nationals. They reside in Afghanistan, and they joined up forces with another group, the Haqqani Network, which had been based in Pakistan's federally autonomous tribal areas, FATA, okay, to form the government in Afghanistan. All right. Now, these Taliban are quite different from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan are essentially Pakistani nationals who'd been residing in the tribal agencies of the federally autonomous tribal areas of Pakistan, FATA, and had been removed from Pakistan by direct military operation led by the Pakistani military in FATA against these militants. These militants sought refuge in neighboring Afghanistan, and when the Taliban take over in Afghanistan, they continue to harbor these extremists in Afghanistan. Now, the primary difference between the Taliban in Afghanistan and the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, is how they actually view the Pakistani state. The Taliban in Afghanistan, yes, late have been quite critical of the Pakistani government, and relations have been quite tense. But typically speaking, the Taliban in Afghanistan have never attacked directly the Pakistani state, have never taken on the Pakistani state, have never directly criticized the Pakistani state, all right? And their goal has been to secure Afghanistan. Their goal has never been to hurt Pakistan, okay? The TTP, on the other hand, who are Pakistani nationals, view the Pakistani state quite differently. They view the Pakistani state as the near enemy, and they view the Pakistani state as being collaborators of the West, of the Americans, the Zionists, the Hindus, and so on and so forth. And they view the Pakistani state as being because of its collaboration with the so-called enemies of Islam, believe that the Pakistani state ought to be targeted and ought to be taken to task for this collaboration. And so as a result, the TTP's extremism and terrorism is actually targets the Pakistani state. Now, at the end of 2022, I would say around November, December, there was an unspoken deal between the TTP and the Pakistani government that sort of fell through. These talks between the two fell through, negotiations broke down, and the TTP announced that all bets were off and that the Pakistani state would be targeted again by them. And that's when we started seeing a ramping up of terrorist attacks against Pakistani soldiers along the border. So initially, all of this is happening on the border, and then suddenly it ramps up even further, and there's an attack in Islamabad, then there's an attack, Islamabad being the capital, and then there's this attack in the mosque in Peshawar. And the TTP takes responsibility for these attacks. The problem is that the TTP has a safe haven in the form of Afghanistan, and the fact that Pakistan cannot necessarily take them to task by any kind of direct military operation because they're residing on Afghan soil makes it difficult for Pakistan to deal with this kind of terrorism and this kind of homegrown insurgency, so to speak, right? Now, Shehbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister, calls for an all-party conference, the APC, to which he invites Imran Khan, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and they refuse to attend it. Okay, so essentially how national security is bleeding into politics is that the Prime Minister of Pakistan obviously has to be cognizant of Pakistan's national security concerns. He has to deal with the problem at hand. When he calls for a national unity response from the entire country by asking for an all-parties conference, and Imran Khan refuses to attend it, well, there you have it. The confrontationist politics of Imran Khan, which he's so good at doing, and the head of a coalition government that is trying to bring people together so that the country can respond to this extremist threat. And there is no immediate resolution to that. And that's the problem, the politics of confrontation, right? And antagonism between the opposition and the governing parties. You'd also asked me about the impact on the economy, and the impact is obvious, right? When you've got these kinds of terrorist attacks, the country is not going to attract any foreign direct investment. Country is not going to attract any business, and as a consequence of that, that hurts the economy even further. But that's a straightforward sort of impact.
Why is a stable Pakistan important for the region?
A stable Pakistan is important for the region and for the world because it's a nuclear power country. It's as simple as that. Pakistan possesses nuclear weapons. And so a stable Pakistan is extremely important. I mean, you do not want Pakistan to fall into the hands of a rogue Islamist terrorist group. Okay, number one. Number two, you do not necessarily want this country to just fall apart without any kind of responsible head of state or head of government that is in control of the country's nuclear arsenal. And you don't necessarily want this economy to collapse because you're talking about a population that is 220 million strong. And that's a very, very big population of people, and poverty levels in Pakistan are actually quite high. This is not a country where, I mean, if the country is on the brink of collapse, I mean, one of the questions you should ask about Pakistan is why is it that we do not necessarily see people out on the streets protesting against the soaring prices and the soaring and the poor economic tensions? Because if you recall, the same thing happened in Sri Lanka, and there were protests in Sri Lanka almost every other day. And in Pakistan, somehow or the other, everyone is just sitting quiet and waiting and biding their time, and that's troubling too. Frankly, it's puzzling because this is a population that is resigned to its fate because it feels like it cannot do anything because of the cards that it's been dealt. And I think that's a problem. So yeah, a stable Pakistan is critical. The other thing, of course, is that from the perspective of climate change, I mean, Pakistan's at the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, and Pakistan is actually sitting on a very, very major fault line. We just saw what happened in Turkey and Syria. The same kind of earthquakes can happen in Pakistan. The same kind of natural disasters can happen in Pakistan, and we saw that with the floods in 2022. So that kind of devastation would lead to poverty that of a kind that is unheard of. And then at the same time, you know that the Pakistani political elite is not necessarily reinvesting back into Pakistan's economy. They are actually investing their money abroad, right? Pakistani wealth is sitting in Swiss banks and in offshore accounts, not in Pakistan. So yeah, this is a poor population. So the country falls apart. I mean, these are people who can't really do much to save themselves, and that's the problem.
Thinking of the strategic issues the world is facing and considering everything you have explained regarding the grave economic situation, is Pakistan in a dire situation of vulnerability that may make it an easier prey for contested influence between major powers or alliances like India, China, Russia, or the West?
Sure, Pakistan can be the site of a proxy confrontation in the sense that Pakistan's economy is not doing well, and who gives Pakistan aid money? It's the Chinese, it's Saudi Arabia, and it's the United States. Now, out of these three countries, two of them happen to be authoritarian and one happens to be democratic. So yeah, it's a site of confrontation between authoritarianism and democracy. Okay, second, out of these three countries, China doesn't care very much about religion, but at the same time, Saudi Arabia and the United States, that's the side for Islam versus the West. Then America is cozying up with India because it wants to contain China. Well, Pakistan doesn't get along with India. That in and of itself is a really, really complicated strategic triangle between China, India, and the United States, and Pakistan is right in the middle of that. So it becomes a site of confrontation, sure. Then when Russia invaded Ukraine, Prime Minister Imran Khan was standing right beside Putin on the very day that Russia launched its first strike. What did that necessarily signal? Maybe perhaps that Pakistan is edging closer to Russia, but I don't know. Russia is too embroiled in Ukraine right now, so I'm not sure that is necessarily something that we need to be watching very closely. But Putin is a very tricky man, so I think we should continue to pay attention to the fact that Russia and China are becoming closer and closer, and that Pakistan is very much dependent on Chinese aid money, number one. Number two, China's Belt Road Initiative and China-Pakistan Economic Corridor running through Pakistan is definitely something that's of strategic value to China. So yeah, Pakistan becomes a site of confrontation. So on many, I think regional politics and Pakistan's role in regional politics as a geopolitical stronghold because of its location make it a country that is very, very important to understand, very, very important to study. However, right now, the crisis in Pakistan is of a domestic nature. So if you were to just put international politics aside for a second, this is a country that has only $3 billion left in its foreign exchange reserves. This is a country which is close to sovereign default. This is a country where the political parties and the political situation doesn't seem to be stabilizing itself. We're going to have provincial elections not at the same time as a national election, which is going to cause chaos for the bulk of 2023. And then, of course, you have a military and you have state institutions like the judiciary and the parliament, which are dysfunctional and not seeming to work. You have an economy that is not functioning. I mean, the problems are of a domestic nature. I mean, international politics aside, and really, the threat from the TTP that we're talking about, the threat of terrorism, that's essentially blowback to Pakistan of a regional foreign policy that it has followed for many, many years, and a rethink is required of that too. That also, by the way, is a domestic concern because it has to do with who makes the foreign policy, the military, right? And so I think Pakistan's problems right now, the far more important and far more critical problems for Pakistan right now are domestic. And I don't know that there is too much room for any of these other countries to interfere in those domestic tensions, even though
I agree with the premise of your question, which is that Pakistan is the site, unfortunately, of confrontations amongst these much more powerful, much more influential, much more important players. And Pakistan's greatest misfortune is the fact that it's dependent on all three of these really, really important, influential power players because it needs money to sustain itself.